Hi, I want to talk about shadow nations and nations that are not defined in a usual sense. Usually, when somebody talks about a country or a nation, then they will talk about geographical location, then there is borders, then they have a central government, either dictatorship or democratic, but they usually have their own language and their own culture, and they uh, they have a history goes way back. So seems like in a usual sense, defining a nation by geographical location and its history and language and culture, and sometimes even religion comes into effect, and then that that's the usual definition that people think, hey, this is a nation. But there are some examples. I can think of two, really obnoxious ones that you can't just help but look at these two. But there are other examples of them. I really don't like constantly talking about the Zionists and Israel or United States and the stuff it does in foreign countries, which is like an example of a shadowy kind of government. But I want to talk about the other kinds of shadow governments that exist, that they are not obnoxious, they are not destructive, they're just affiliation of people, but this affiliation is not defined in a military sense. It's not defined is in a sense that will try to overthrow something else, or it's not like ISIS. Well, that's a shadow government right there. But I just want to go somewhere else with these ideas. It doesn't always have to be such destructive groups or similar to terrorist organizations that operate around many borders. Well, the the religion of Shia itself, the teachings of Imam Hussein, which is like the third Imam, and his martyrdom, it is like a shadow government. It exists. This religion exists in many countries. Well, Catholicism also it can be called a shadowy government, or a kind of affiliation. Well, Catholicism exists in many countries, and they have a spiritual teacher or leader. Sufism can be modeled like that. That there is a spiritual teacher, there is a certain teaching. Well, we have several Sufi orders, so they could be called like several nations. Ismailis are a nation. I don't think they have limited number of people in the world, but still it exists and has a history and a unifying religion or ideology or thinking. Then, but this is not limited there. There are a lot of families that they don't all exist in the same place. Like well, there are some small ones, and then the wealthy families that they span like Europe and United States, and well, I'm kind of going on the footsteps of Jeremy Rifkin, because I was looking at some of his books and converting bits and pieces into audio so I can listen to them. he talks about decentralization and lateral kind of moves that people make, and the European dream. Uh, the Americans, they're very hostile to globalization now. Well, you could look at some of the work by Infowar that they totally condemn foreigners. Uh, but the most obnoxious globalizers that there ever existed were the Zionists and the Americans. For example, I'll tell you some of the examples of globalism that the American practices, and it's very negative, very destructive. Uh, they, uh, for example, there are laws on the books that some court makes some ruling, and then the Americans they try to enforce that ruling of their court or their government policy in all kinds of countries, countries that they're politically completely alien to the United States. Well, recently they arrested Huawei executives because of jealousy that this Chinese company has better technology, they can provide better services. I don't know, some of the telecoms, they are owned by Huawei directly or indirectly, and if you notice that a lot of companies that are very successful and you might yourself be buying a lot of your services from them, they're really made up. They're like a front store. Everything looks American and beautiful, like the Yankees would like it. But when you go into the back of the back room of the company, you see that all the technology and all the main CEOs, everything in the company, all the phones, all the machinery, all the technology come down to almost to the clerk level is either German or is Chinese or Korean or Japanese, and many of these companies that are really provide all kinds of services or are the economy of the United States, they were haunted or they were prosecuted or pursued by American government at different historical periods, and many of these companies they have adopted this facade. It looks so American, so Yankees. I mean, if you look at a lot of the fronts of these companies, you see that it's an impression of what a Japanese would think that an American company should look like. And then as soon as you put the facade away, you see, hey, this is Japanese, this is Korean, this. I think a lot of the things that people buy here, they were made in China. They're not American. Nobody here made or thought of them. The prices are completely irrelevant to what this place does or what the Americans think. If you go to Walmart, you see that a lot of the stuff they sell, it was never made here or conceived here. Many of these products are totally alien to this economic landscape or to this culture. Well, I want to just use one example that you would think that, hey, this is normal, but this is not. This is completely alien to U.S. Economic or manufacturing or culture. Well, I had old iron. I kept using it. I think it was like at least 10 years old. And I'm very frugal. I use everything to its maximum. Anyhow, finally gave up. The wires were so old, I had to get rid of it. I went to Walmart and I was looking for a cheap iron. I was thinking, hey, probably it's gonna be like 20 bucks. And I was looking at several models. Some were like a lot more and some were cheap. I found one that was like 8 bucks. Now, if you are an American, you would think, hey, this is normal that somebody would make a very nice iron and would sell it for $8. But that's totally very abnormal. If you are an economist and if you have any kind of history in manufacturing or engineering, you know the cost of the material in here just to get these parts for this thing, it will be more than $10. Okay, forget about the labor and also cost of transportation. So the very first thing that somebody who's got any kind of education or have any kind of critical thinking would come up with is that this was made very cheaply with a very high technology elsewhere, like China or Vietnam or Malaysia. There's no way that this came from here. Okay, so this there are shadow nations, shadow economies, shadow products that are all around us in the United States that they totally don't belong here. That they are just the facade of a different company or different nation doing business here, but they are put on this makeup to look like that this thing came from here or was made here or we had anything to do with it. Well, when you listen to like Trump, he's going like this in his State of Union that, oh my God, the years of Chinese stealing our technology and our intellectual achievements and it has to end and we have to reclaim I don't know what to reclaim. A lot of this stuff were not even conceived here because, for example, I was studying transistors and the stuff, the electronics or the CPUs that were made. A lot of this stuff not only were made in foreign places like Japan or China, but they're also put together into a package over there or in China or Malaysia or Korea, and this has a history which is like maybe 40, 50 years old. That's why many Americans, they feel that they're living in a place that really is a fake world. That yeah, it is fake because all that the United States has been engaged in is warfare and militarism, and all these other nations, they've been going after industries, after things that make wealth or produces things, and they have tried to minimize the presence that might be obnoxious to Yankees, sell their products or live their lives. I want to tell you an example that's extremely old. It shows that there are shadow nations here that you would be hard pressed to even think that this is a shadow nation. Well, in the World War II, there were Japanese immigrants to California and to other western states because all they had to do is cross the Pacific and come here. And many of these Japanese, they were engaged in many different industries. So when the Japanese internment happened, and they were very much traumatized, they came out. The only thing that many of them were left with was if they had farmland or the farms that produce food. All the other jobs were completely destroyed because of the political action, or because having to spend time in jail. So there was a economic destruction of their jobs and their livelihoods. So the only thing that was left was these lands or nurseries. In fact, if you go down on the yellow pages and look at the nurseries that they grow flowers, or they grow exotic plants, food stuff that seldom you find in regular store. A lot of them, the names, they're all Japanese. There were these people that they are like a shadow nation. They minimize their political or their social presence, but you see the companies, they're all around us. I mean, this is just the beginning, and I think that as the decentralization progresses, then you see this more pronounced, because it's now possible to make lateral moves. Like it's possible to do business without having to deal with the political system here or the economic system. You would be surprised how much of the stuff that the U.S. government or their immigration or their politicians do is nothing just more than just bullying, being a gatekeeper, dismantling and destroying foreign governments, stealing their central bank gold, harassing different nations, see how they can tax them or benefit from them. A lot of the immigration laws that you study, and they do have history, it is directed into harassing the Chinese. Well, in the past, like 40, 50 years ago, they had this unnatural fear of the Chinese and the Asians, that because these people had a lot of population, that they would take over the world, and they will have a huge presence in the United States. So a lot of the immigration laws were directed in incarcerating, preventing these people from coming in. And the Americans, they never really developed much industry, or if there were industries, they were basically stolen from other countries. I want to talk about another shadow nation. This is like really old. Is that the Nazis that developed very nice aerospace industry. And in fact, they had developed anti-gravity devices, and I don't know where they went with that. That's another lecture that they used it. But then after the war, the Americans they induced many of these people by bribery and by just taking over the industry and brought them here. In fact, a lot of the technology that you see, the rocket technology, it really was not developed in any shape and form here. It doesn't belong to America. It belongs to a shadow nation, like a nation or technicians or engineers that became here, and they did all this stuff. In fact, I think they kind of hid or went elsewhere with the better forms of the technologies that they had developed. And another example is that now, because or it has been going on for a while, the U.S. engages in so much militarism and harassment of foreign countries, or actual warfare. There is other forms of war. It has been going on for a very long time, like cyber war, that many countries, Iran, North Korea, who knows, Japan, Russia. I don't know about Japanese. I think they keep it under wrap or hide it. But there is a theft of technology or whatever that the U.S. has managed to develop here. They have been siphoned off by cyber attacks. For example, if you look at a lot of the fighter jets that the Chinese are making, they are technologies that totally belong to or belong to some American company that they had developed and they just siphoned off. But as we go on, I think the American public is kind of has this notion or knows that this is going on, that really this place, it doesn't have anything short of these belligerent politicians and bankers or militant military that would signify to be a wealth or nationhood, that really what is making this place run is these shadow nations, these foreigners. Well, one obvious shadow nation is the Zionist criminals. They operate through AIPAC. They have like an octopus control of the Congress and Senate. But there are other shadow nations. For example, the Wahhabis. They have a lot of cash. They go around by politicians. Well, I was reading some archaeological discoveries. I think there is hints that there might be other civilizations that exist. They are with us concurrently, but the public really doesn't know anything about it. And I think as the communication modes become more extensive, then more shadow nations will come into being, or there were in the past, but they were like they were separated from each other, or they weren't as active because of financial or political divisions that existed, prevented them from being, but now they can come in. The other thing that I think will be happening is that once a place, say for example India, manufactures radios very cheaply and nicely, then because there is all this contact between nations, I think it's like Iran and United States or England, they have an industry which is the radio industry. It's like when you can buy something and be in contact, have people work for you and do things with a few dollars. That's like you own the factory, but not really. But does it matter? It doesn't. I think more links will appear that it makes things easier. Well, I like speculating about these ideas and also about manufacturing histories. And while I was listening to Trump's lecture and the State of the Union, but is there really a union here? Is there really a unifying economic system, or is it really these foreigners that are doing business and providing all the goods and services, and all we have here is a bunch of very dysfunctional politicians and population. But thank you for being in my YouTube channel. Please subscribe and don't be shy, leave your comment.